Hello, and welcome to Marketing Tips for Winning with Experiential Content. My name is Alex Kelly. I'm the Director of Digital Marketing here at Saros, and we are very excited to be here today on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. This is our first ever live broadcast. We've never done this before. It's a new thing for us. So any and all mistakes are completely intentional, just to make us feel more relatable. I'm pleased to welcome my guest, my colleague, Ryan Brown, the Head of Brand Strategy here at Saros. Welcome, Ryan.
It's great to be here in our office, Alex.
In a nice corner of our office.
It's a nice change when we normally get to hang out in a conference room and chat, but except we got a couch and get to a little more comfy here.
Exactly. We're just trying to set the mood and build a nice atmosphere.
What's the mood with this guy here?
It's the last guest that we had. So Ryan, you have a really interesting background, but I'd love to just kind of run through some of the previous roles that you've had. What really got you to where you are here at Saros? Why the interest in brand? Why the interest in experience?
Yeah, I think since I was a kid, I always loved experience from, whether it be physical experiences. My friend and I used to create a haunted house, or he had he grew up in a wealthy neighborhood. He had a stage in his bedroom, but we came up with a fictitious theater company, and I was always backstage, running the lights and helping come up with a brand for it. And that just sort of followed me kind of through life. And I guess what sort of got me to here at Saros and brand. Relatively early on in my career, I was fortunate to spend some time at HubSpot back in the very early days of inbound marketing, and that's sort of where I learned a lot about digital marketing at the time. And while I was there, I found myself on the brand team, and as part of the brand team, did a number of things in the digital space and the physical space. And then what led me right to before I got here to Saros is I spent about 5 or 6 years or so in experiential marketing at an agency, working with a bunch of brands, doing a bunch of cool promotions. But it's really exciting to be back in the marketing technology space, working with marketers, and that sort of journey has offered me a really cool different points from the digital world, the physical world, and brand has just been something I always sort of geeked out over.
That's great. We're going to come back to that idea too, that relation to experiential marketing. But I wanted to warm you up a little bit.
Okay.
A couple quick-fire questions, more personal, before we dive into the meat of the session.
And I'll warn the audience, I've not been prepped on these, so
I
don't know what's coming.
Are you ready?
Bring it on.
First one. What is your spirit animal?
Ooh. I don't know. I'm going to go with either a rhino or a unicorn. Those are the first few things that popped into mind.
All right. What is the best concert you've ever been to?
Ooh. This is going to be revealing. Best one I've ever been to. I guess not my necessarily favorite artist. I recently saw Pink when I was in Amsterdam in a big stadium show. I've seen a couple of her concerts, and they've all of them been phenomenal experiences. I got to see her most recent tour down in the pit next to the stage, and literally she's zipping around overhead of me and stuff. So that was a really cool experience.
If you could take a trip anywhere, where would you go?
The moon.
The moon.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. Who is your creative marketing crush?
Creative marketing crush. Oh, I don't even know how to answer that one.
That could be a person, that could be a brand, that could be anything.
As a brand, I for some reason Delta. I love Delta, and it's a little bit hard to explain because they're I wouldn't say they're overly sexy, but they've inspired such loyalty with me from the experience and what I've done. I will seek them out and pay more money specifically for them, and I seem to even have more loyalty to them over Apple. Apple I would have answered a while ago as a brand that I have a crush on. But I more of an experience crush on Delta than I would even say a creative marketing crush.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, last one.
Okay.
What is your most embarrassing professional moment or mistake?
Oh, man. Well, it was sort of professional. So I started a theater company when I was young, and I used to run around doing everything as a entrepreneur of a business does, right? So I would be up late running the lights and things. And this one particular, this actually wasn't my theater company. The story's still the same. I was running a middle school theater program, and we had this performance, and I went out on stage to welcome everyone in the audience before running back to the light board to do it. And I was so frantic, and I remember like telling people that like during intermission they could go and buy T-shirts in the lobby, but all the people were laughing at me when I got back to Headsets and Light. They're like, "Do you realize you said T-shirts?" And I'm like, so that was pretty embarrassing because it was like a middle school thing. Like I don't know if the audience knew that, but everyone was like cracking up because like, yeah, you know, you definitely said like T-shirts. So,
great. So we're going to get into the meat of today's session. Obviously, as an experiential content creation platform, we're passionate about this topic. You and I have spent hours and hours sitting in a whiteboard room, talking through all these details. Now we just get to do it on camera.
I love it and geek out. So,
so I'm going to start you off with a general one. Why are smart marketers investing in experiential content?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the relationship that us as marketers have as a job, right? The goal at the end of the day is to take someone on this journey, and that journey is really from like awareness to advocacy and like, who the heck are you to like, I really freaking care about you, right? Is kind of that path. And along that way, there's many, many different touch points that happen that marketing and brand have some sort of influence over. But in the past decade, it's unavoidable that more and more of that journey is taking place in the digital space as well. So depending on if you're a B2C brand or in particular B2B brands, so much of that journey and those touch points actually takes place in the digital space. So it's really important that marketers are taking aware of like, what is the experience that people are having with their brand. One of the stats that shocked me, but I wholeheartedly believe, is that by next year, you know, experience is going to overtake price and product as like the key brand differentiator. And so when we think about that, it's really important that we're mindful and deliberate about how our brand is experienced and perceived in the sort of digital world.
Yeah, I mean, as a digital marketer myself, I see that shift happening more and more rapidly. Companies like HubSpot and Drift that are investing in new conversation channels, more of the relationship that's being built with prospects is even happening before they ever get on a call, or if they ever answer a call to begin with. They're looking for that quick access to information. They're looking for somebody to get them what they're looking for, or answer their question in real time. And most of that happens digitally. Yeah,
and people like that sort of self-service aspect of it, or being able to sort of have it on demand. And so much of that is being powered by digital today. Being able to go and like, I need to figure this out. And what you turn to the internet, or you turn to a website, or you turn to social media to start figuring out the answers and stuff. And a lot of people do that as many different stages of the journey. It often starts it, and then depending on when they have a particular need or moment, it almost goes digital first to see if they can figure that out.
So how does that relate to somebody looking to do experiential content, right? So if you think of your customer journey as specifically the digital customer journey as a sort of through line or a spectrum of beginning to end, from awareness to advocacy, where does experiential content fit into that? Is it the totality, or is it individual moments?
Yeah, I mean, I think, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, but for people who've never even heard the term experiential content as well, right? Like, that's new. So I think the baseline understanding, just for people to get where we're coming from, what they need to understand is that when you think about what is the majority of things that's powering content on the internet today, and if you were just to take like an aggregate of like what people are pushing out there, and a lot of it is the similar content, which I would call like static, traditional marketing content, which is maybe a web page or a blog post or a PDF that might be a white paper ebook, right? That is one of the largest things that's being consumed. Now, granted, homepage and stuff are a bit different. So when you think about that, when you think about this is the piece that people are engaging with, your question is like, well, what is the experience that people are actually having with that? And it's a very much undifferentiated experience when they're just accessing that type of content at any different stage of the journey. So it's not giving people a lot of flexibility to control their particular brand experience. Now, to kind of answer your other question there, when I think about how do you impact overarching a brand experience, like I always think in like the micro and the macro level of things. So you've got like, what is a brand or customer experience in totality? So any one of our clients or customers that when they come to Ceros, they over time in aggregate like have an experience with Ceros, and like this is their customer experience with us. But along the way, that might be 1 year, 2 years, a million years, they'll never leave Ceros or whatever it might be, but they have opportunities for experiences there, right? When they decide that we're gonna like become a partner with Ceros and we sign our agreement, or we onboard them, or where they go through these moments or experiences, those are actually opportunities to create what I would say like micro experiences. And it's really powerful when we think in those terms because it gives you the ability to then look at like, well, what are those shared micro experiences or moments that we can then decide to architect that experience for people, and that can really help color and shape the experience that our clients have with us as a brand.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm curious whether you could share a particular example of a type of experiential content, or maybe something one of our customers is doing that you find really fascinating in the way that they approach creating experiences for a particular part of that journey.
Yeah, I think I can give some examples, right? And so it's often, the first part is it's shifting from something that is a static, more passive experience into something that's more active. And that can take the form of using animations or interactions or other elements to help draw people into it. And as an example of, I'll caveat by saying this. I think, as we've had conversations with marketers and stuff as well, and for me, I saw it very starkly when I was in the digital marketing world at HubSpot before, and then I came to Saros. It was like, and I had that 5-6 year gap in between, and I come back and I'm like, well, nothing has really changed in the thinking much, right? Like ABM became more of a thing, and so, but for the most part, the type of content that marketers were using within ABM was still powered by very similar marketing content that's making up the bulk of it. So it's predicated on people needing to have a bit of a mindset shift and opened up the fact that there's a new possibility. So example I can give, I'm inspired every time. Our customers have taught and inspired us so much, but one I'll just share because I had shared a stage with her not too long ago is Car Gurus. Ashley Carr, who's the VP of marketing there and specifically over B2B marketing. And I was really fascinated about her story with how they started with experiential content and how that sort of matriculated throughout. In the beginning, just to get them started, how does this even work? And they picked one particular test that they wanted to do, which was this report that was important for them, something that they had created before. And as the B2B side of Car Gurus is around engaging different car dealers. And those car dealers were very, very interested in, well, how are people buying for cars online? And Car Gurus had a lot of information on that. And they'd produced a PDF on this for, several years before. They decided to shift that PDF into a piece of experiential content. So taking that content and instead of having it be something you passively scroll through, it became this animated or immersive piece using interactivity people could dive into. And what they saw performance-wise against from that piece to the sort of PDF piece, we're like, oh my God, it was really powerful. And that opened up the door. So from there, they had sort of a measured test along what we were talking about before. It's okay, where else along that journey can we test this out? They started it in a big campaign that a piece of experiential content was sort of the hub. It was like a traditional campaign where they had PR and they were launching things. But that campaign way outperformed what their expectations were for it. And since then, they've moved that throughout the journey to customer enablement, customer loyalty, and it's been pretty cool just to see how they started the one piece and now across the board, they're finding different moments along that journey to sort of implement experiential content.
So we've talked about some examples of what this might look like or where our customers are starting, but how should people be thinking about what experiential content is?
Yep.
Is there a framework they can follow or some sort of definition of how do I recognize this out in the wild? How does this differ from what other brands are already creating? You mentioned the overwhelming amount of more static content that's being used in every marketing strategy, essentially everywhere. What is experiential content, and why is this such a fascinating topic for us to talk about?
Well, the easy answer is this content awesome, yes or no? And then you know your answer, right? Is this boring or not? No, I mean, in all seriousness, I think the best way to understand that is what makes content experiential. And for a while, people who are like, oh, interactive content, isn't that the same thing? And we deliberately as a company made a shift from interactive to experiential because when we think about it, there's more to it than just adding interactivity. The way I like to describe and thinking about what makes content experiential is to understand the various elements that go into digital marketing content or digital content in general. And there's 5 levels. The first 2 or 3 levels most marketers are doing today, and I think that's what's powering the bulk of it, right? So level 1 is narrative content, what is just the copy and text, and take your average blog posts and stuff, and there you go. Level 2 is visual, so you start throwing in some imagery as well, and then you've got visual content. put 1 and 2 together, you've got videos where you have like narrative content with visuals as well. Level 3 is pretty common for most marketers in the digital space today, and that is really around integration. So if you're using a marketing automation platform and you're integrating forms or chatbots or other elements, those are things that you can just integrate directly into sort of like your content experience, if you will. Levels 5 and 6 is where I think content gets experiential, or 4 and 5, right? Yeah, 4, lost track of my levels there. Level 4, is the interactive level. And that's where you can start building and playing around with interactivity. And there's some really cool stuff that you can do there. If you think about digital marketing content today, and again, blog posts, PDFs, white papers, these sort of things, you print them out in paper and you have the same experience you do in like print media, except for maybe you can play a video or a various element on there. When you think in terms of adding interactivity to a piece of content, a whole new world opens up, right? Like the way I like to think about it is like in video game terms sometimes. Old school video games, in a lot of ways, like you would have these levels and you go from point A to point B and you're kind of locked in on the path that you need to go. Open world video games nowadays let you go and explore wherever you want. Interactivity gives you the flexibility of creating multiple paths or journeys. It's like gamification. So you could have a piece of content that's a quiz base, and it's like, okay, you're looking for a recipe. How much time do you have? Do you have 10, 15, or 30 minutes, right? Here. Give you like a main vegetable that you want to work off and click on that. And suddenly you can lead people on this cool path that unfolds, customized to what they want. Or you can do cool things like custom gamification stuff. So there's a lot of things that you can do based upon the action of building interactivity into it. And level 5 is what I would call the immersive element. And this is why we just don't talk about interactive content, why we talk about experiential content. This is where I think content gets really fun, really sexy, and really cool. Let me give you an example. The best way to think about like immersive content is being able to do triggered animations and time things that really heighten the experience of that content. And so the way I describe it is I paint this picture. I went a few years ago to a really nice hotel in Dubai. And it was like on a high floor, and I got up there and I remember the moment very clearly. Like I opened the door to my hotel room and I step inside of it. And like the minute I step inside of the room, like the lights in the room just had like this like grand fade up. And then right after the lights fade up, in front of me, there was this massive like window, but the curtain was closed. But then it like from the center parted and just revealed this most like sweeping views of it. And it was like stunning. Now, had I just walked into the room and the lights opened the view there, it would have been cool. But it wouldn't have created that moment for me that was like so powerful. We can do that with digital content as well. So when people hit a key moment or different moments in that content, elements can animate on, things can trigger. When you click on something, an action can happen. So when you start layering in those animations, when you start doing things that are timed to where people are relative to like the piece of content, you build an interactivity and then you do layers, levels 1 through 3. That's really what makes experiential content, and that's why like interactive isn't just enough to even, cover all that.
Yeah, 2 things really stand out to me as you were walking through those. The first being talking about interactive content. It goes back to what we were saying. Consumers of digital content and consumers of just any sort of brand interaction, they're looking for that personalized experience. They're looking for information now. They're looking for, we're layering on tools and technology that helps us have conversations easier or quicker or more accessibly. But the content itself can drive that conversation, or they can set some sense of exploration where the experience is theirs and they are getting delivered the results that are personalized to them based on their inputs, right? So
I think you bring up such an interesting point, because when you think about the conversation happening around experience in the digital space, it almost leads people to being like, oh, you mean like personalization and whatnot. And I think that's really important, but I think it misses a piece of the important conversation around experience, right? So being able to serve up someone a piece of content that's more relevant to them when they're looking for it. So like you take it as simple as, am I a dog or a cat person? It just showing me, if I'm a dog person, showing me more dog content than cat content because this is more relevant to me, that's great. But if the dog content is a bunch of PDFs, like you can be doing better. And so that's why I think there's another element to the conversation that's missing. And that is the content itself. How do you make that content an experience? So in the way, if you go to a store and you walk inside an Apple store, like it's not just a store. I mean, everything about the Apple store is curated to be an experience as well, right? And that's even differentiated from when you go to like a Best Buy or whatever. And so they each have their own look and feel, but they're deliberately created to make that experience. Right now on the digital space, if you take that same comparison, most companies' blogs, you go to the competitor's blog and you swap out the colors and logos and it's the same experience. It's not very differentiated. There's an opportunity because we're operating in the digital space, right? We've taken like this legacy book format here and we've just digitized it. But because we're using a phone or a computer, which can recognize input, it recognizes where I am in a particular piece, like all the things that we've been able to build with apps and stuff, we can build that into content nowadays. And thanks to Saros and other stuff, there's a lot of technology out there that's making it more scalable. So for a long, long time, it's easier for marketers to be like, that's not realistic, right? Like the cost of producing things that are triggered at, custom animations, or when you get to certain points, like I need a developer, I need to hire an agency, I need to do all these things. And like, that's improbable. And that's the mindset that a lot of people have today, not even knowing that actually there's new ways that you can take all these exciting things, scale that and deploy it. It requires like first awareness to it, and then two, having a little bravery and courage to like wade through into this like brave new world. But I'll go so far as saying that like I think companies and brands that are doing it are seeing massive results. I think any marketer out there that's listening today, right? Like if you're like, hey, as you're creating content, do you find it easier today than you did last year, doing the same thing you're doing last year to like generate more leads and get more engagement and stuff? Like no one out there is gonna be like, yeah, it's easier. It's harder, right? So the brands that we're working with that are taking the risk to like blaze this trail and figure out how to do this and align themselves are seeing like outsized results and benefits from it, right? And I think it's like now's the time to get in on doing this because it's gonna be like really fun and exciting. Over time, like this is not gonna just be a nice to have, this is a need to have. Like this is where things gonna be going, and as more and more people see what this is, like so the earlier people, like marketers can embrace this, why smart marketers are embracing it early on, they can get a little bit of like first mover benefit, but also this is where the world's gonna be going anyways. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, and even as this is a sort of exciting new direction, I think it's important to highlight, like as we're going through these levels, we can think of it almost like a pyramid of the level 1 of narrative elements, the level 2 of visual elements. It's jumping to experiential or interactive or immersive elements. It doesn't negate the need to have a strong foundation of a good narrative. I mean, I'm sure any content marketer or content creator is saying, like, yeah, no doubt. But you have to be telling a good story, and you need to have a strong point of view. You need to be able to support that with good evidence. Creating an experiential content piece that isn't a good content piece isn't necessarily going to fix it, but it allows you to build more immersive, exciting experiences from the stories that are resonating with your audience, the things that are working. You can elevate that even further.
Yeah, there's no, I think there's really no shortcut to greatness. Like you've got to do the work, and B, you've got to like have the raw elements. So what this is not is like, oh, I can just like buy this thing, plug in the thing, add this tactic, and boom, I have like more leads. And you're absolutely right. Like, when we here at Saros believe two things very fundamentally, is that creativity matters and experience matters, and in particular with creativity matters, like you have to be coming from a place where you've got like strong visual elements, strong narrative, like those components of like really good storytelling and like bringing a fresh perspective and creative mindset to it, like that's always going to matter. That's just like table stakes. It's important now. I still think that people that are doing more traditional content, the ones that are more creative with a better story and better visuals, are performing better. But when you take those elements and then you get to sort of like add in these other dimensions to it, like you get to supercharge like the creativity and experience and stuff. But you're absolutely right. Like you have to bring that to the table as a foundation. And the good news is a lot of marketers out there today have already begun that shift. Like when I think back to like my earlier days at HubSpot, there was a main movement around like quantity. Like, well, just do more. We need more leads. So like, we'll create more blog posts and create more content. And like, at some point, marketers are like, this is not really working the way that we want it to work. And there was a shift that happened from quantity to quality. And they've invested in storytelling, they invested in better visuals, they invested in these elements, which had, I think, great results. That's the foundation that is going to build towards, I think, really great experience, and going to help anyone as they sort of decide to embark on this journey to make their content more experiential.
It's fantastic. So what are and you alluded to this a little bit before when you were talking about some of the technological advancements, but what are the problems that marketers and creatives, designers are facing that is driving this change? Like, why is this such an important change now in the marketing and design world that we live in?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think just to sort of recap what I said before, I mean, when you think about how people today are creating content, in most organizations, and we'll focus really on marketing, right? Marketing's like, okay, we need to do X, Y, Z in our marketing goals and objectives, and it's often like we need to like generate this many leads, we need to convert this many of them, and we need to do blah, 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 blah. And so then they're like, okay, we go to like a prescription of like, okay, so we will do like this many blog posts and we'll link that to this new offer that we create and we'll send them a link to register for our webinar, and in that process we'll generate leads, right? It's become almost formulaic, and we're getting smarter about doing that a little bit better with ABM and targeting it a little bit more personalized, but it's the same thing, just smarter. But I still think like that's a bit of a challenge, right? That doesn't solve the fact that the content itself isn't more experiential, isn't creating an experience. And so if you go a little bit deeper and you try to understand, well, why are people just being so formulaic and prescriptive, you look at the way that both the teams are set up and the tools that they have. Some organizations have varying degrees of creativity and design resources in-house, but most organizations start with marketing being like, this is what we need. And if they're lucky, they've got some design resources that they will make it pretty for them, right? And designers use like Adobe Photoshop and those tools, and they sort of make them all pretty there, and they send it back over to marketing, and marketing ships it. And some of the stuff marketing uses their own tools. They've got their CMS and marketing automation platforms, and so like, oh, my WordPress site allows me to do these 3 different template styles, and I can create a page with text on the left or text on the right or whatever that might be. And so they're limited to that. Or my marketing automation platform, I use this to create landing pages. Like, it's so locked into that framework. If you want to do something that, like I mentioned before, where you are building things that have interactivity and triggered animations, triggered actions, like you have to have a web developer. That is what has been sort of believed so today. And so marketers and designers really needed a new way or process to be able to scale this. Not to sales pitch Saros, but I mean, that's really what we've tried to solve. Like, we recognize that as a problem. We recognize that like everyone is being held back, you know, literally creativity was limited because this was a challenge. The only way to do this before is to like have a developer, have an agency. It's limited. So we're like, how do we unlock and unblock that creativity? Boom, a platform that comes along that removes the process of needing to use code or developers to do that. So there's the unintended sales pitch of Saros, but that's the challenge, and people need to understand that there's a new way of doing that. New technology can take what would take months and weeks to days and hours now to scale it, and suddenly it becomes so much more realistic and possible to do that. And I might have not even answered the full question that you asked me.
I think it does highlight a lot of the issues that marketers are faced with. And I think it also, interestingly, opens up new challenges of, as you unlock this creative ability or you unshackle designers from, you know, the restrictions of whatever templates they can innovate within, constraints does breed creativity in that you need to solve for a particular problem in new and creative ways. But when there's infinite possibility, or, you know, at least exponentially more possibility, now it's, how do I reinvent what we've been doing, or how do I consistently evolve this over time so that it's familiar enough where somebody's going to engage with it, and different enough that it's going to engage and entice and you know, build that sense of awe or awareness with it. So there's a whole new world of challenge ahead of us, which I think is incredibly exciting.
Well, what I'm excited, and I'm going to plug your session next week. So next week we're going to dive a little bit more into nitty gritty of how do organizations actually make that shift, right? So the privilege we've had is getting to watch our customers become successful and learn from them, and then we've got to sort of like drink our own champagne as well. So I'm really excited next week where we get to sort of grill you and figure out, well, what have we done as an organization to embrace it, and how do we scale that? But you're right. Outside of just the technology shift and the mindset shift, one of the things that organizations need to be willing to do is like test and try it. And as we're on this topic right now, the advice I would have to anyone out there, which is like, this sounds like a lot or difficult or challenging, the way in which people are successful, I have found when they do this, is you start with a test piece, right? You do one thing and you see what happens. And in most cases, you find that right test piece, and you're like, whoa, this is really exciting, and we found some really shocking, surprising results. And then you find a way to be able to sort of operationalize that in your organization. And as part of that process, like, templates can still be a thing. It's just new templates, right? I mean, like, you know, just riff on this for a second. Like, templates in Saros aren't templates in the way that people think about templates. It's like, what's cool in this whole mission of like unlocking creativity, like the templates themselves aren't locked down, but you're also not starting with a blank page, right? So like, I know that feeling of when, you know, I do more presentations and stuff, but when I start from a blank page, it can be like, for some people they love that, and I imagine Jack, our creative director, probably loves a blank page. For me, sometimes I'm like, okay, like this, like I could go anywhere with this, and sometimes that can be overwhelming or daunting to people.
This wall used to be white.
This wall, yeah, it was like, no.
Blank pages no more.
But anyways, the cool thing is being able to give people a starting point, but that they can still go anywhere with it. And I think that there's possibilities of that with experiential content, and certainly we believe that, of how do you give people a little bit of like frameworks or starting point or guardrails, but still not limit them in the ability to if they can dream something, you know, our goal in my say is like, try to do it. And simultaneously, sometimes what people just need is some really good inspiration.
Right.
So
tying this back to your backgrounds.
Yes.
And you have a really interesting track of, you know, starting in technology, spending a lot of years in the experiential marketing world of, you know, real world activations and events. And when the first thing that people often think about when we use the terminology experiential is experiential marketing, and the connotation that has is real world. We're talking about activations, we're talking about incredible events, we're talking about concerts at the end of conferences like Inbound or Dreamforce. It's these unforgettable real world moments that help build that personal connection between the brand and whoever's there, that individual. So how are experiential marketing and experiential content different? And how are they also the same? What is that connective tissue?
Yeah, I think having had that experience of going from digital marketing to physical experiential marketing and then back to digital marketing again made that such a stark realization for me. Really this disconnect, and how we talk about it, and I often talk about it, is there is this gap that exists, and it's the IRL and URL gap, or the real world and the digital world gap. And what that gap is, it's the way in which brands bring their brand to life. So a lot of times when you think about experiential marketing, it is that experiential marketing is a thought process of, I as a company and as a brand, how do I want people to experience it? And that could take forms of, you come to my office and what do I do? It could be taking my brand to an event and we build out a whole interactive lounge or booth, whatever that might be. But the art, if you will, of experiential marketing is thinking about the way in which people are going to engage with my brand in the physical world, and that can have many different applications and outputs. The whole shift with experiential content, and I like when people associate the two of them together. I don't like necessarily that sometimes they get confused by the two of them, but what we want people to think about is that same sort of thing. So now for the past decade or two, and if you just go look at all the stats on experiential marketing, more and more people are investing in brand experience in the way that people experience their brands. And because we started off in the very beginning when we were talking about the journey that people go on from awareness to advocacy and the amount of time that that's now done in the digital space, it's really important that people have that same mindset of, in the digital world, how are people able to sort of experience and interact with my brand? So when the bulk of that had been blog posts, PDFs, white papers, static pages, you know, there's an opportunity now to take that same level of passion and creativity for our brand and make it much more of an experience and make that brand itself experiential in the digital world.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So as brands are, if they're already investing in experiential marketing, they're already, you know, a lot of marketing departments spend a lot of money on event sponsorships or, you know, hosting their own conference and building these real world experiences. As they shift into experiential content and investing more in these digital experiences, can you highlight some of the, and some have been sprinkled out throughout the talk,
Sure.
highlight some of the benefits that experiential content brings? Like
Sure.
what are the things that they can sort of hang their hat on or look to optimize for as they're creating more of these experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of benefits, but whenever I try to distill it down to like what are the three main benefits, the three things are this. One, when you put it head to head with another piece of like normal content, like it just let me clarify normal content. When you put it out there with the traditional content that marketers are using today to power the sort of like marketing journey, and you put it head to head with a reimagined piece of that content as experiential content, the experiential content always does better. It's differentiated, it creates much more of an experience. Another one is that there's actual sort of like fundamental tangible dollar value that can be attached to that, right? In many cases, like we have found when people take that type of content, and for example, this always blows my mind when I now think about this, but like the moment when someone is about to like become a customer, or like you're like trying to like close the deal and you're sending them a proposal to do business together, how common is it for an organization to like whip up a Word document, PDF that, and like send an email of that over, or some version of that story, right? Yeah. That's very common. And like this is the moment when you're like, work with us, like give me a contract, particularly in the B2B space, right? And it's like blows my mind that people do that. But if you now instead, like at that critical moment, reimagine that piece of experiential content, our clients have come back and reported not only does it like in many cases like soar their win rates and their close rates, but some of our clients that work in the services industry as well are like, hey, we're able to charge more money for the services because of the perceived value of our brand and the services that we're offering. And they use that along the way to like do customer reports and engagement. Like that elevates them as a company by elevating their brand in the digital space as well. So there's real dollar value to it. And the other one is it's differentiated. And we talked about this before. Like I don't have a real stat. I say like 90% of like content on the internet. But if you just take a look at like the number of like templated web page, blog posts, PDFs, things that are out there that are driving the bulk of the marketing journey for there, it's not differentiated. It's not sexy. With experiential content, you have the opportunity to stand out, to be sexy, to be different, and all the other benefits that we talked about it actually creating an actual experience.
It's fantastic. So I could sit here and talk to you for hours, and I have.
Yeah, we've done this.
We've
done this before.
Talking about this topic. But I want to spend some time and turn it over to our viewers. Any questions that they've had as we've been dealing with this conversation. So I want to start with a question here it's an interesting one, especially as we look to continue down the road that we're on. Especially myself, I head up a digital marketing team, which has any number of roles, both in the marketing and execution side and the creative side. So what does a team look like that's executing experiential content well? What are the roles that are good to have? How can we build that alignment between creativity and marketing?
Sure. I mean, I think, and I'm excited to definitely dive more into this question next week. So tune in next week if if you're watching. Yeah. But what I will say is this: I mean, the teams that decide to go for this and what they look like have at least one important thing in common, right? They've largely adopted that experience matters and creativity matters, and they go so far as giving creativity a more proper seat at the table. I described earlier in our chat today about how many organizations, if they're fortunate enough to have like a design resource, like the way it works now is like they kind of get like something flung over the fence and be like, make this pretty. What has started to happen in these organizations is they've brought in creativity earlier in the process, and it might be by bringing in a designer or a creative to be part of the problem-solving solution earlier on, figuring out what's the brief, how we're going to create this. Or it might be the marketer adopting a more creative mindset earlier on towards problem-solving as well. So one of the things in common is that creativity is just like embraced earlier on as part of the process. And really it depends of where a company might be in their sort of maturity of adopting this. We've seen a lot of organizations, and we'll dive into this a little bit more tomorrow, about how they've invested in experiential content designers themselves, where you maybe bring in like, a UX strategist, you bring in UX to like digital content. I mean, one of the things that blows my mind is companies are producing all of this stuff with their name and their logo on it, all this digital marketing content every day. But I wouldn't go so far. I wouldn't say that those companies treat that digital content like it's a product of their brand. When you think about like you're building a product, you put like design and UX and testing and all these things into it. And I know marketers do their testing, but like we're not thinking about like how will people experience this? Like, you know, at Apple, like when people open the box, they're concerned about that. Or if you develop software, you're testing and how does this button go here, over here? What's the experience of it? I think when people bring that passion to digital content as well, it can have like massive results. And it can just start by having an affinity for like, hey, this is a product of our brand. We want to treat it that way. And it sort of invests a bit in both experience and design and creativity coming together in a more formal part of the process.
Yeah, I love that idea of content as products,
Yeah.
and the experience as the product. And sort of teeing off that, because that's an evolved view of potentially a more advanced view of this experiential content mission. And you alluded to this earlier in one of the questions before, but if you're new to experiential, you know, what's the best way to get started? And I will tee this up next week, same time, Wednesday the 13th, 2 p.m. We'll be talking more about this, but I'd love to hear, you know, your thoughts on
How do you get started?
How do you get started? And you mentioned Car Gurus as an example of this. They started in a particular way and evolved from there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I think this is going to sound really pedantic, but like you have to have you have to want to start, right? So it's from there, and depending who you are, the practical way to get started is to find a way to honestly do a test. Like you're not going to just the customers that have been with us for a couple of years that are like seeing like crazy success results, like it's been a journey for them as well. They didn't overhaul it overnight, but like 2 years later, a lot of their organizations or their process and flows look very different than it did 2 years ago when they set out on this journey. So what I would say, if you're looking to get started with it, know that it is a journey. One, have a genuine desire to want to like be great and do greatness. And actually one of the things I love to talk about that I didn't mention earlier before is, you know, this, I'm going to go on a little tangent here because this is a point I think is important for people to make, right? There's all this talk about experience. And we've already said why experience matters in all of this. But the thing that has always struck me is like what makes an experience an experience. And there's been a lot of talk in the digital space of like, oh, more personalized or whatnot. But for me, when I remember an experience, you know, what made like a dinner in the evening such an incredible experience to me is that it's really, really good. Or it might be really, really bad. But the opportunity to be really, really good is great. So if you were to think about like digital marketing on this spectrum that you were to evaluate, is this piece of digital content an experience or not? And that means this content would either be really, really good or really, really bad. The bulk of digital marketing content today, I think, falls in what I would describe as the mediocre middle. Like it's really undifferentiated, it's not memorable, it's not either really good or really bad, it is just marketing. Mm-hmm. So there's a real opportunity to do things that are really, really good and avoid that sort of like mediocre middle spot there as well. So I think this is, so that tangent is more of a shift of like why it's important to start. So it takes a genuine desire to not be mediocre. It takes a genuine desire to be like, we want to strive for really, really good. There's not a lot of really, really good digital marketing out there that stands out. It's like, you know, maybe it performs a little bit better, but there's an opportunity to like be better, be more creative, and do more. So have that start and then know that it's a journey. And you've got to be willing to like give it a wholehearted test. And then as you find out what works well for you, your brand, your organization, it's then having, you know, it's then going on that path and that journey of transformation. It's really a transformation story at the end of the day. It's not something that you just like slide this in and there we go, it works. You have to be willing to embrace it. And so that's why it's best to start with a test. Get excited over like the potential and what it can do and start dreaming big. And then as you start seeing it, like you can't, whoever came up with that saying or like, how do you eat a whale, like one bite at a time? Like it's, you know, it's true with experiential content too. If you're going to do a transformation like that, you can see where the potential is and where you can go with it, but it's a journey.
And the last one we'll get to, if experiential becomes the next big thing, which it will, you heard it here first.
Absolutely.
How do you keep your content unique and relevant?
How do you keep the content unique and relevant? So I feel like a broken record here, and I think if Simon, our CEO, is watching or watch this, he'll appreciate this answer as well. But I really do think creativity matters, and it says it behind my head. If I don't know if the camera shot has it there, but I truly believe that. And here's why I think it's important. When I think about experience, and even with experiential content, the thing that's gonna like keep things fresh and original and stand out to people is what will keep something from becoming commoditized versus differentiated and special. So a few years ago, you could start ordering coffee on a mobile app and pick it up, right? And like that was really cool. And I think Starbucks did it first. But like that same experience is now something that can be done at Dunkin'. And so that one, just investing in like a piece of technology alone doesn't solve like your experience problems, right? Like now most restaurants and cafes and stuff can deploy a similar sort of technology. But still, when you go to Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, there's something that's fundamentally authentic for each of those brands. They're different experiences, but inside of a Starbucks or inside of a Dunkin' Donuts, you're not confused as where you are. And I think these brands do a good job of staying true to that, but like I think that comes from a genuine place of creativity matters, right? I also think those brands and brands that reach a national level do care about experience. They have to at some extent because experience is so important for any business today to survive, and it is, as I mentioned before, going to be the main differentiator over price and product as well. But to create things that are special, that are memorable, that stand out, you need to have a genuine combination of a passion for who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And then I think you need to bring creativity to the mix to that. And when you put that all together, that's where specialness can happen. And so that rings true even if you're going to be doing experiential content.
Yeah, and I think it also ties back to that idea of content as products. And those products that brands are putting out there that are their digital storefront or a way to order and deliver coffee on demand, they are constantly improving that experience. And think of an individual piece of content as a living, breathing product rather than I've created this guide, I've created this ebook, and I'm done with it, right? Like we did that already. We're on to the next project. You can learn from the way people are interacting with that experience and feed those insights back into improvements or changes to that experience so that it performs better over time. It doesn't stagnate typically like most digital content. I mean, blog posts tend to ramp up in terms of traffic over time, but we could think of our heavier weight creative assets the same way and put the same level of attention time and time again into that asset to make sure that we're coming back to the well. We're making this as a cornerstone piece of our experience as effective as it can be.
You brought me just back to, as you're talking about that, to my creative marketing crush or whatever, right? And I said Delta. It's funny, like what I crush on about the brand isn't necessarily the product or what is the experience of the brand that they've created. It's not just the end product. So, and I think that the lesson I'm trying to say here for marketers is when you actually treat your overall experience, your digital content as an experience of your brand, not just your actual product or service that you're trying to sell, but the whole piece of it. Like Delta gets me from point A to B the same way American or United would, but it's like all the things that support around it, whether it be the mobile app or the Sky Club in there or the staff on the plane. All these other aspects of the experience just work together, and I feel like they really care about it. It's like they care about my safety and they get me there effectively, and they probably get me there as effectively as these other brands would. But the level of which that their passion, their creativity comes through and how that manifests for me in all these various different touch points is what gets me so fired up over it. And I think that is what is the opportunity for brands in the digital space. That's why I'm so passionate about it. And I hope people, get excited for that too.
Well, I'm excited, and this has been a pleasure to sit down and talk to you in our typical fashion where we go on and on. But thank you everyone so much for tuning in. Again, we are going to be back here next Wednesday, November 13th, 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be swapping roles.
Tables will turn.
So we'll be diving more into the tactics of how marketers are actually winning with experiential content from our own perspective and client examples, and dig into how they're actually doing these things in practice and more examples of that. So please join us again. Follow up with any questions that you have. We will get around to answering the ones that we didn't get to on the air, or email us at marketing@saros.com. Connect with Ryan and I on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to chat with you as a follow-up to this. But we are so excited to be here and can't wait for next week. Thank you all so much for joining in.